My inbox these days is an avalanche of asks, needs, and calls to action. They seem to come from all directions, more every day. My brow furrows, my throat constricts, and my neck tenses, knowing I can't possibly respond to them all. I feel grief, frustration, and despair. My grief is compounded enormously by the splintering, othering, and factionalism that's happening among what were previously beginning to coalesce progressive social movements. My heart, mind, and hands want to respond by doing something, hoping I can somehow contribute to healing by acting on behalf of what I love most deeply. But so many of those calls to action trigger my own embedded pattern of reactive overcommitment, my ego's desire to live up to some Wonder Woman ideal. And that's only one of the inward tensions that I'm experiencing, the gaps where my heart's values and my culturally embedded biases are clashing. I've always evaluated my own progress in learning and growing by whether I can show up as truly myself, no matter where I am or whom I'm meeting, and whether my ideas and my values are aligned with my actions. When they aren't, I know I'm not being my best. One of the main inner conflicts is that there's often a schism between my pattern of chronic overdoing, taking on more than I can realistically ever do well, and my yearning for spaces to just be, to be able to integrate all that's changing within me and throughout the world. My habituated knee-jerk response to the sense of urgency, of feeling compelled to respond, to act, and to do, results in blowing past my physical limits, driving myself to work too hard and too long, beyond my body signaling fatigue. I want to leverage the gifts, privileges, and freedoms I have to do as much good in the world as I can. But while some of those impulses stem from my heart's honest desire to be of service, it's also become clear to me that my habit of trying to overperform has also been motivated by a defensive ego, by a deep-seated conditioning, perhaps from white supremacy, to always try to seek perfection, by an overinflated sense of my capacities, and by my sense of responsibility to fix or repair what's broken. I may prefer to think of myself as liberated from patriarchy, misogyny, racism, and the dog-eat-dog capitalist habits of mind. But those cultural patterns have been around a long time, and they're deeply embedded in our psyches. To imagine otherwise can prevent us from working seriously on evolving beyond our long-standing conditioning. In my case, unless I'm being really attentive, some ways that insidious toxic conditioning can manifest is in more and faster are always better, and results count more than relationships orientations. But if I operate from that place, I often accomplish less anyway, and it feels as though I'm hurting my soul. My body and heart need more time and space to integrate and adapt. Bayo Akomolafe quotes an African saying, "The times are urgent. Let us slow down." I've become convinced that the faster is better orientation actually gets in the way of building the collaborations, alliances, and partnerships that we so desperately need now. Collective efforts require time, spaciousness, and relationship cultivation to build trust. Without that, they lack a solid foundation and won't last. one valuable lesson I learned from a mentor and brilliant writer, Terry Tempest Williams, is to turn toward and embrace the challenge of finding ways for opposites, for apparent contradictions, to dance with each other. When I'm able to do that, new pathways are often revealed. Sometimes it's in the in-between spaces that useful new ideas and ways forward can surface. Great collaborative alchemy can often emerge from bringing very different people or ideas together if they're gathered with sensitivity and care. Whether it's youth and elders, people with a spectrum of gender identities, or from different ethnic communities or class backgrounds. We may have never needed the mutual aid, insight, solidarity, and wisdom that we have to offer each other more than we do now and in the months and years ahead. This attempt to create the conditions for this social connective tissue to emerge has become my life's work. I yearn to help form alliances among diverse peoples, communities, and movements with strong enough relationships to last for the long haul. Because I think that without those relationships and that bridge building, we may not make it. Conservation biologists tell us that ecosystems with the greatest diversity of species have the greatest resilience to regenerate after trauma. That's been a guiding value at the heart of Bioneers since it began, that the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. From our very first gathering in 1990, I was blown away by how the very disparate visions, perspectives, and projects of the presenters and attendees revealed the weave of a social fabric that I'd never understood as connected before. I felt it as an embodied experience of what Buckminster Fuller called the preferred state, and it changed me. Nourishing spaces in this pivotal time for collective, collaborative, brain and heart storming so that greater wisdom can emerge together has never felt more timely or useful. I'm thrilled to see so many new partnerships, collectives, and communities of practice with us here, and to recognize how often sharing leadership is creating more joyful and regenerative organizational structures in our world. Here, no one way of relating to the massive structural changes, to the reinvention of everything about our society is considered to be the answer. It's all connected and interdependent, and we need as many visions and ideas and ways of seeing, listening, and being as we can surface, express, and cross-pollinate. As Janine Benyus, the godmother of biomimicry, put it, we need a rowdy bunch of solutions. For me, that experience of co-creating connective tissue to influence, connect, and align all of my and our parts toward wholeness feels like healing, renewal, and freedom. We've simply got to keep working towards the collaborative, large-scale movement building that so many among us have long been cultivating. Another practice in my learning curve, and I must admit, this one can be really hard for me, is learning to listen first to what others are saying, deeply and without judgment, before my loud inner monologue prompts me to offer my opinions. A lot of this is hard work. It requires patience and perseverance. But finding ways to relate to those varied complementary opposites, seeking balance and wholeness in my inner world, putting relationships ahead of tasks, and trying to imbue my actions with compassion and empathy When I can do even some of that, I feel profoundly connected and alive, and then far more able to carry on with my work in the larger world, but with more centeredness, calm, and open-heartedness. These past months, what I've also found hugely helpful in maintaining my sanity, balance, and health is remembering to also focus on the immediate, on what's close to home in my community and region, on the lands and animals and plants and relatives where Kenny and I live and love. Our two beloved rescue dogs, Wagmore and Zephyr, died suddenly this winter, within weeks of each other. As I've mourned the loss of their big personalities, both to our lives and to the land that holds us, I've been feeling how deeply I loved and learned from each of them. How much I adored their particular foibles and personalities, their distinctive ways of walking, and their expressiveness, not wishing for either of them to change a thing. They taught me about paying attention to the present moment and about the joys of play and rest and food and cuddling as real needs to be tended to and enjoyed every day. I'm grateful now that regardless of how urgently I felt the world calling, it hardly ever interrupted our rituals and the celebration of our lived experiences together. Their consistent love, presence, and reciprocity strengthened my heart as I worked through their departures. After their deaths, I created a nightly ritual for myself. I printed pictures of them and made time each evening to weep and to write about them. I felt into their love for each other, for the land, and for each of us, and I prayed for their journeys after walking on. That ritual and having a creative expression of our love helped me to integrate their loss. I believe that if there are masters of unconditional love on earth among us, it's likely they are the dogs. You're right? Within myself, I vacillate between my grief and mourning over the violence, suffering, and losses all over our world at the moment, and how to restore and nourish my heart with love, prayer, and practice. I'm finding a new muscle growing in me, one that connects the preciousness of life and loss with love. Perhaps, as I learned from Alice Walker, fully experiencing grief can expand our heart's capacity to experience love. I wonder how we might find healthy ways to grieve the losses so many among us are experiencing, to come into full presence to expand our heart's love while we're still embedded in a culture that wants us to get over it, move on, toughen up, and return to normalcy, especially when any imagined aim toward normalcy has been exposed for the corrupted, deceitful, broken society that we used to accept. I see how much I and our Western culture have prioritized action, endless expansion, and innovation while turning away from limits and death, from listening and from reflecting, and how little we valued tending and healing, rarely creating spacious opportunities for deepening connection while valorizing heroic interventions and action adventures. When I'm able to slow down and give attention to my body's guidance, I can recognize and release my own reactivity and my conditioned responses to fear, outrage, and grief. I'm trying to hold my accountability in balance with self-forgiveness, attempting to stay open and to ground and center myself as needed so that I don't add to the polarized madness I see all around me. I remind myself to mimic Mother Earth's wisdom of seasons and cyclicity within my body, and to create the spaciousness, stillness, and rest, and the patient listening that are all needed for my inner knowing to emerge. Cultivating loving harmony in myself means shifting from evaluating success based on numbers reached, scale, and speed to measurements of integrity, depth, quality of connection, and honesty. At the same time, I'm trying to be mindful of my need to compost saviorism, to relinquish my illusion of control, to trust in surrendering to life's mystery while recognizing its beauty and brutality, and to pray for, listen to, and be thankful for receiving support from the invisible world. I prioritize opening up and softening to connect wholeheartedly and with a celebration of our interbeing with those I care about in whatever ways I can when I'm needed, including the two-leggeds, four-leggeds, winged, finned, and rooted ones. Dr. Camilla Majid names 3 pillars of what she calls pro-social behavior, what she suggests we need to cultivate to be in right relationship in this time. I believe these are also essential practices for developing our capacity to become connective tissue, to heed the call for solidarity that's so needed in service to life. They are fierce compassion, caring deeply with empathy and commitment for what others are going through. Cultural humility, remembering that ours is only one way and not the best way of relating to the world. And discomfort resilience, trusting that we are honestly not nearly as fragile as we may imagine. If we do that, we may be able to soothe and perhaps help heal our human ecosystem, to be able to collaboratively serve the greatest calling of our time, remembering ourselves as children of Mother Earth within a larger community of kin, to serve nothing less than the reinvention of human civilization in partnership with interbeing and with solidarity. Together, I believe we can navigate the great turning that Joanna Macy named so well. Thank you.